Morning. Let me grab all my whips. Yeah, about that. Hey everybody, welcome or welcome back to just one more row. A little crafting vlog we got going on here. So, good morning. It's early and it's super foggy for me. Very quickly, I want to let you guys in. I'm going to try this whole formatting thing for the vlog. So we're going to start off with things like what are finished objects, works in progress, stuff I want to rant about, and then I'm going to try to add in a book review or some other literature review because I have a lot of books, some of which deal with knitting, some deal with crochet, some are primary resources, historic magazines, and basically where I find the stuff that I make. And I thought you guys might find that interesting, so I want to start adding it in. Onto the formatting thing first off. For finished objects, I don't have any. I have been working on some stuff, so let me go ahead and show you what I've been working on, and then maybe you can kind of see why I don't have any finished objects. First, a project that I know you guys have already seen. Ta-da! This is the Matron's lacy blouse, and it has a very, very fine gauge to it. But I have the front and the back done. So now I just have to put the sleeves on. This actually went together fairly quickly and fairly easily once, like I said, it's a 6-row pattern. It's very easy to memorize. It's just, putting on 12 inches for the back in a lace pattern. And when you have, again, a rather fine gauge, so I'm doing 12 rows per inch, it just takes a while. I mean, it's not huge, but it still is 170 stitches. So, it takes me a minute. And the part that seems to go on forever is the 4 inches of ribbing down at the bottom. But I did do a very quick, rough try on to make sure things like I could actually fit my head through the neck hole and stuff like that. And so far, I am utterly in love with how this looks. The neck, it pulls in. I think it's going to be very comfortable. The sleeves fit and sit where they're supposed to. It is wide enough in the chest, so it does have a little bit of extra room because it does have more stitches in the front than in the back. So I think shaping wise, that's going to come out really well. I have lengthened this. The pattern does say work it to whatever length you want, so I'm shooting again for 15-inch side seams, so 15-inch from my arm side down. That looks like it's going to be a really good length. Nothing in this pattern has been really complicated, and there hasn't been a whole lot of alterations and fixing that I needed to do. And when we get to the other project, you're going to understand why the bunny quotes on that. But Matron's lacy blouse so far, not super difficult, and I think it's going to look really, really, really nice. So that's what's been going on there. It's just taken me a little while to get that back done. My next finished object is a lace shawl. So I had talked about doing this beforehand and making this, lace shawl that was originally part of a baby's layette set. This is from 1935, and I'll go ahead and make sure to pop all the information down below. And I have gotten to, if I don't drop my yarn everywhere, I'm this far in. The way this pattern is worked is you work your lace edging. Okay, you work that one, horizontally. So from your perspective, you start here and work your way across. So you could really make this any width that you wanted to. It's a nice border edging. And then you're coming through and you're picking up stitches, and then you will work that center panel basically vertically. And then you're supposed to make 4 of these triangles, which is what they're going to come out to be. You can see the edge, which is going to be interesting to block because this edge is going to be very tight. And I think one edge is going to be tighter than the other. We're going to see. I'm picking up stitches right now. You're going to work your center block, which is going to be a triangle. Then you sew all 4 triangles together. And then you put an extra little crochet border around it. So there is that. And that's how it's supposed to be worked. So I'm working on the first triangle right now. I am doing this in 3 colors. Obviously, I have the gold, I have a blue, and I have this white. And so what is going to end up happening is, obviously I've got the gold for the outer border. I'm going to do, there's a wider strip of moss stitch ribbing, which I'm going to do in blue, and then the center I'm going to do in probably blue and white stripes, because there is a diamond triangle sort of lace pattern going on in there. So far the picture has been fairly deceptive, so I am actually not entirely sure what the center is going to look like, because in the picture it does not look like this edging is separate. It also does not appear there's a set of eyelets. The eyelets do not look like they're part of the edging, and you can't see, like, the moss stitch in the photo doesn't show up at all. So the picture is deceptive, which can happen in vintage patterns, frankly. The picture is a guideline, and you never really know exactly how it's going to look until you have made it yourself, which is what I'm doing. Now, the other thing with this is that in vintage patterns, odds are there's going to be a math error. And we just need to accept that the math error is there somewhere, and it is hiding. Well, I have been finding them in this pattern. Whomever wrote it down, or, translated from handwriting into typewriter, and then, or the typesetter. Anyway, somewhere along that process, from finished object to pattern in a magazine, there was some form of translation error. I don't know if it was written down wrong, or if it somewhere along the way problems occurred. But there were a lot of problems. This is like my second or third trying to get this to work. The pattern is written where most of it is actually this border down here. And there are a lot of issues just getting this started, because it gives you lots of instructions for the corners. And they were off. So there are places where rows are missing, where new extra rows have been added in. Stitch counts are not correct. So it'll say knit 2 when it should be knit 3. Things like that. That has been a constant thing, and it has involved a lot of, read the pattern, go, that looks weird, but you try it anyway, just because I've done that before, where I thought something looked weird and it turned out that it was supposed to be that way. Try it, realize it didn't work, rip it back, figure out how to fix it, and then redo it. So there has been a lot of that, and some things I didn't think would work are actually working. Like this nice little scalloped edging at this end, I didn't think was going to work. It's working. And there's a couple other little areas, like getting the knit, when something's supposed to be a knit 2, getting that wrong instead of like a slip knit. So it is what it is. But overall, I think this is going to, it'll be interesting to finish. I may finish one triangle and then go, oh no, we're not doing this again, and take it apart and rewrite it so that this pattern makes a bit more sense. The idea is very beautiful. The actual execution of it, not so much. But this is the risk that you take when you're doing vintage or historic patterns, is that sometimes the written pattern and the picture, if there is one, don't have a whole lot to do with one another. And sometimes the written instructions are not great, So if you're going to work within this kind of niche thing, you kind of have to really start to understand how things go together and why they go together that way, and then how you can interpret those directions to kind of get something that looks a bit like the picture and figure out where you need to correct for things, hopefully before you get there. So anyway, that's the rant there. And that's the second object I've been working on. I do have my color work piece, which is for this one over here. It is getting worked on, I just have to film it. So now I have 3 other projects. There's a lot going on. Obviously, I moved everything here. I've been going through, I know you guys can't see on the shelf, everything from like here down. But I went through the shelf and I've gone through a lot of my other knit and crochet goods. And for some things, I love the idea of them, but they need some work and a little bit of help. They were a little too short. Maybe I don't like how the buttons are anymore. Some of these were experiments just to prove that I could do them or that this is possible. So I went ahead and made them. In our last home, I wore them around because it was just my partner and I. Except now it's not just my partner and I anymore, so I can't always wear them around. Earlier this year, I made this blouse. And as I lift it, I'm certain you can see what part of the problem is. This thing is barely larger than my head. And in fact, when I made this at the beginning of the year, I even remarked on it that it is very short. It is a crop top. It is a very pretty crop top, don't get me wrong. The sleeves are a little fluffy, not too super fluffy, but a little fluffy. There's plenty of room in the chest. The band can get a little close there around the midsection. But what I figured is rather than trying to take this apart, which I apparently did a good job of weaving in my ends, so good luck on that, I would go ahead and take this and try to turn it into something else, which in my case is going to be a dress, or at least a longer shirt. So I'm going to come through and pick up along this bottom band here, and I'm going to continue crocheting this pattern, and I will probably change my hook sizes as I go to make the bottom of this expand out. By the way, that's a very kind of quick and dirty way to add in width without changing anything about a pattern. Is just go up a hook or a needle size as you go through, and I found that in some of my other historic patterns. I have one that's a very beautiful evening gown, and they have one lace stitch pattern that they use throughout this entire thing. They just change needle sizes, and that's how you get this pool giant skirt at the bottom. Moving on from that little trick, I'm going to take this same crochet pattern that I have up at the top, and I'm just going to continue it from the bottom down. And I have plenty, you can see I have some more of this pink. To me it reads as pink, everybody else says it reads purple, but whatever. Some more of that yarn in the same pink and or purple color. And I'm just going to see how far we get with it. Mostly because I'm also, like, I bought the pink when it was on sale. And be careful about buying things on sale. Just because that they are on sale does not mean that you need to order a whole bunch of it. I'm trying desperately to use it up. Anyway, so I'm going to take and lengthen that one into a dress using crochet. And the next part of this is in a similar vein of something that I made. I did it as kind of proof of concept, and in its current form, it is not very wearable or usable. However, I'm going to see if I can make it into something wearable and usable, and just modify it so I don't have to get rid of it, because I kind of like where it's at, but it just needs a little help. This is one I haven't shown before. This has little puff sleeves. It is a cardigan. It's done in like a rusty orangey red and super dark brown. There's a little puff sleeves on here, and it was again a very early attempt at me rewriting patterns. And this is before I got into the system that I use now, which works. There's really not anything to add to this. This was a lot of like just power through it sort of thing, where I could work out the math so far, and then I just had to sit there and be like, oh, that doesn't work, take it back. Does this work? Nope, take it back. Does this work? Yes. Okay, keep going. There's a lot of that, but I did end up with this shirt. Unfortunately, again, this shirt is a bit too short, and I don't really care for the buttons, and so what I'm going to do is first off sew my button band shut, because the buttons are too small with too wide a spacing. So what ends up happening is, because this outfit has very, very, very little ease. It's like at 0 ease. So when you have 0 ease and you have buttons, they tend to pull. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just sew that button band shut, so we don't have to worry about that. And then down at the bottom, because I have a bunch more of this orangey red, which, by the way, I love this color. It's a very nice color to wear. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this cardigan into more of a pullover situation, pick up around this ribbing area, and then I want to add in a skirt, and then I want to kind of do a lace. One of my lights just decided that it doesn't want to work anymore. We'll figure that out. Anyway, here is, like I said, the sweater. I'm going to go ahead and pick up along the ribbing, and then I'm going to work that skirt on with a lace edging at the very bottom. And we're going to see how that plan, what happens with that. So it should be very interesting. I've already done this with a couple of my other shirts that were just a little bit too short. So I went ahead and took apart an older project, harvested the yarn. I went ahead and used that yarn in a different way. So I'm not really wasting anything, but I'm also removing an item from my closet that just isn't going to get worn anymore. So speaking about taking things apart, I was going through some of my items, and I started finding old projects. Like this one here was a vest that I had kind of started and was trying to figure out all the math for it, and then just realized part of the way through this that this plan is just not going to work, that the shoulders are terrible. I don't like it. I don't like the pockets. So it got put in the naughty pile. And what I'm going to do with this is, again, take it apart and harvest the yarn. And you guys may recognize this one from before. This is the men's lumber jacket, and it is the inspiration piece for the Bryophyta sweater, which I'm going to get to. Hold on, we're not there yet. But this is the inspiration piece for the Bryophyta sweater, and it is just, the shaping for it is too big. The arms are insanely too long. This was meant for somebody who I swear must be like, they need to be a professional basketball player. Just the proportions are so big and so long, that if you are a person who is very tall with very long arms, this may be a great option for you. It is not a great option for me. I cannot wear that because the sleeves are 5-6 inches too long. This isn't like, oh, it's a half inch, you just pull it up. No, this is half of another sleeve too long. But it did create a really good inspiration to make the Bryophyta sweater. I did learn quite a bit about this. Like, I really do like the garter stitch edging, and I love the idea for this pattern. I may actually end up using the stitch pattern somewhere else, but it was just not functional for this garment and the way that this garment was written. So the goal is to go ahead and take this one apart and harvest the yarn, because the yarn is very beautiful. I like it a lot. It's a lace weight. It's doubled up, so I'm probably not going to take the two pieces apart, because while I am passionate and very willing to do the grind to get stuff, there is only so much grind I'm willing to do. So there is that section. The Bryophyta cardigan is still coming. I have a bunch of it done. My editing program decided to eat all of my progress. And I shouldn't say that. I'm blaming a program. Really, I went in and I started clicking a bunch of stuff, and I didn't pay attention to what I was clicking, and I probably erased it somehow. I don't know how. And I was unable to recover it, so we're having to start over. But even with that, I have been able to add in some more of the tips and tricks that I've learned in the last few weeks since then, so I think it's actually going to come out looking better. And that's kind of everything that I've been working on, moving between projects, trying to get all of them done. Plus we've been moving some furniture around here. So, you know, our apartment has been going through another reshuffling process. As, you know, we're kind of doing this spring-ish cleaning, which is start going through things. Do you need them? How can we make them most useful? And sometimes that involves having to move furniture around to get it in the best location for us and for utility. Hence, no finished objects. I'm working on it. But, really quickly, as we're coming to the end of everything I've been babbling, I wanted to go ahead and do kind of, like I said, like a little literature review, kind of go through some of my books and my source material, because I have a lot of it. I will eventually get into some of the stuff that I have on my computer because I have a couple thousand items on there. Don't worry, we're not going to do them individually. My goal is to kind of go through and talk about, like, where do I source my material from? What are individual magazines that you might find interesting? Some of them are in English, some of them are not, and the use of primary sources when looking at, like, historic or vintage patterns. I believe very much in using primary resources. So a primary resource is written by the person of the time. So when I am looking at vintage or historic patterns, I want to find primary resources. So I want to find where is the best resource for, say, Parisian patterns during the late 1880s to early 1890s. If I want to find that out, one of the ways that I like to do it is I literally just go look up knitting and crochet books or magazines from the late 1880s to early 1890s that were written in or published in Paris. That just seems like the easiest way to do it, is to look at your primary resources. Now, it does take a lot of slogging through things like Internet Archive, and it does take a lot of slogging through, you know, the digitized sections of libraries, if you can find ones that are publicly accessible, sorting through museums and things like that, because it is a bit of a niche topic. You may be looking at items that are not always in your native language, so my French is... I'm working on it. But I have that part of it going on, so, you know, your patterns may not always be in your native language. How they're written may be very different, but you really have to go in and be willing to sort through all that stuff. I have done some of that already over the last couple of years, so I'll go ahead and share what I have found. And if you guys have any suggestions or thoughts or things that you have found or resources that you really like, that you feel that would be really cool to share, I am all ears. I'm totally down for, hey, you have a new resource that, you know, you just have to go in and basically read through a bunch of these things to get to the good stuff. Yeah, I'm willing to do that. Totally willing to do that. We as a community all learn when we share what we know. Even if you don't share it here, share it with somebody. It will benefit everyone, because if we all share our knowledge and the knowledge gets A, spread around, and B, gets kept active, it's when we take and hoard our knowledge that you have run into the issue of, if you're the only person who knows how to do something and something happens to you and you are not able to pass on that information dies with you. Okay? It's just a reality situation, like it or not, that's the way it is. If you don't pass on what you know, it dies with you. Anyway, moving on from that somewhat morbid topic. Last week I talked about color and color work, and I realized, in looking at all of my stuff, part of the inspiration for doing this whole literature review is that I didn't talk about where I get some of my color work knowledge and passion and inspiration for when I'm designing color work, or, you know, I'm trying to figure out how patterns will work together, specific stitch patterns. The resource that I have found that works very well for me is Traditional Fair Isle Knitting, and this is by Sheila McGregor. This is an amazing, amazing book. The first section of it, when you look in, gets in some into the history and does give you some ideas of, you know, history, construction, and does give you some very simple patterns. There's some, you know, for how to make your own pieces. Beautiful photography that you can see in here to kind of give you some inspiration of what did happen to be made. So I just thought that was very interesting. I love the photography. I love seeing all the different colors and patterns and ideas that are there. And then the last half of the book are charts that have just different, you know, just different color work patterns. These are done with like a little dot matrix. So you will have a grid and then you will have dots that are filled in. And the dots are a contrasting color and the little squares are your main color, or color A, color B, however you want to think about it. But they just show you those dots so that you can then come in and can very easily say, okay, well, I need a pattern that is X number of rows tall, because this is done on height, not on width. How can I take these little individual pieces that may seem very different or desperate, I feel like I'm using the wrong word there, disparate. When you have any kind of color work pattern, you could take and break it down to, okay, well, this edging here has, you know, it's a checkerboard pattern. Here is, you know, basic triangles. Here are arches, you know, here is a snowflake pattern. And when you put all of them together, you might make something that's very tall and looks incredibly intricate. But if you actually stop and really look at what's going on, you will notice that, well, you have a 2-row repeat here, and then this is 4 rows, and then you have another 2-row repeat here, and then, well, the snowflake is 35 rows, so I get that that's the big part, but then you have another bit down here, and that's a 2-row repeat. And once you start to see that, you can start to see how to put things together so that it looks incredibly complex. It looks incredibly complicated, and people who don't know will look at it and go, oh my gosh, how did you ever get to this point? When really what you did was take several little 1 to 4 row patterns and put them next to each other. And by putting them next to each other, they tend to blend, and using color, you know, using your color choices, you can create a blending effect. And it looks way more complicated than it is. But in this book, the last half of it's going to show you a lot of it. This is not a super expensive book, but there's a lot of information that's back here, and I use it all the time when I'm doing any kind of color work, like, and I'm designing it. This is one of my go-tos. This is what I go back to a lot. If you can, go to your local library, see if they've got a copy that you can then use, and check it out and see if it's worth investing to have permanently part of your library, your personal library. As always, support your local libraries. They do great work. They are a great and important resource. Many of my historic and vintage patterns I get are through libraries. Anyway, moving off of that particular rant, because I can talk about that one all day. So yeah, that's what's been going on this week. And thanks for hanging out. And hopefully some of this was useful to you. And if it was, awesome. And if it's not, okay, you made it this far. So thanks for sticking around. Yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.